The journey is conversations with ordinary people about stories of transformation and how we may have had setbacks in our life and how we persevered through those, how we've learned from those obstacles, and how they've maybe helped us on our path today.
Well, welcome to the journey. My name is Kevin Polke, and I am the host of the journey. And we have a special guest with us today, Lynne Conner. Lynn and I have done a couple pieces together over the years. Lynn is one of the many things that Lynn does is that she is a journalist for a couple different papers here in the State Line area. So Lynn, welcome to the journey.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. I know I think one of the very first times that we met was over an article that you were doing, and I believe it had to do with some aspect that you were covering regarding mental health, and
Mhm.
that was I believe that was at the Four Corners back when it was on Linden Road at that time, and we had taken some pictures outside on the back of the deck.
Mhm. Right. I remember that. I think it was the fall too.
Yep. Yeah, it was beautiful during that time period. So Lynn, maybe before we get into your journey as a journalist and a writer, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, what do you when you have an opportunity for fun? What do you do for fun? What hobbies, interests that you have?
Well, a lot of my hobbies and interests are things that I had previously despised growing up. So, um, I think probably well the one thing that I've enjoyed actually since I was a teenager, got into it as a teen, is biking. So I do a lot of biking. I mean, not like races or anything like that, but just kind of finding that biking helps physical health, mental health, emotional health. So I kind of keep track of that. And last year was my biggest year. I did 1,600 miles, which is pretty good. I am not going to make that this year. And it's interesting, the older I get, the more it's like, I can't just like take off and go. And I've got to like, okay, what area or what, do I need this kind of brace or that kind of, you know, help or biofreeze or something. So, but I still managed to enjoy that and pursue that. The other thing I enjoy doing, I do a lot of crafting, and this is something that is kind of surprising because I never liked art. I never was good in art growing up, but I've done all kinds of different things from painting to jewelry to sewing. Sewing was a huge one that my sweet mom, bless her soul, wanted me to get into. We tried making a nightgown one summer and practically killed each other. So the sewing kind of got tabled for quite a while, and then probably about uh, 12 years ago, she gifted my daughter Kara and I a sewing machine for Christmas. So, and we kind of, worked on some things together. Kara learned projects on her own. And then when I had a chance, and the kids are a little older now, so I've been kind of getting into that more. And I think for me, I don't like to follow like the pattern or the rules, so to speak. So I do a lot of trial and error, but some of the projects I do I think are pretty cool, and I'm good at alterations, and I'm also good at creating, different projects.
Nice. Good deal. Yeah, tell us a little bit. As I mentioned earlier, that's how we originally met was, through a writing assignment that you had for a paper that you were working with. Well, yeah, tell us a little bit about how you started your uh, career in writing and in journalism in particular.
Well, I think it probably goes back to my senior year of high school. I graduated from Auburn High School. And my senior year, since I did not take physical education classes due to my orthopedic condition, I had an extra elective. So every year I would get to do something a little extra. And one year I took conversational Spanish, and I took psychology one year. Those are all interesting. And my senior year, I decided to take a journalism class. So, which is kind of unusual because mostly you start journalism like as a freshman, or if that's kind of your interest. So I started with a journalism class. I had enjoyed writing essays, as crazy as that sounds. I'd enjoyed writing essays as a sophomore and had always kept a journal through high school, kept a journal, and tried to do some creative writing. So I took the journalism class my senior year of high school, and I really enjoyed it, but I decided I wanted to go into communication education, which is, I was supposed to be a speech teacher, like a high school, junior high to high school, 6 through 12 speech teacher. And I had English as a minor. That's how I started my freshman year at NIU. And I got into the education. I thought, well, in the communication field, if you go into media, you have to move around a lot. So I figured communication education would be more stable. I would be a speech teacher. It would be something I could do. And I got into student teaching, which was a little rough, but it went well. It was fine. And of course, when I graduated, the economy was in a downturn, and they did not need teachers, especially English or communication. Speech teacher was almost impossible to get. So I ended up probably, I think it was before I graduated, I had the summer after my freshman year of college, I was looking for a job, like an internship. All the media outlets, no, TV stations, they would give you an internship, but they would expect you to do it for free. And I needed to make money for school, of course. So the last stop on my going to the papers and the different TV stations and radio stations was the Observer Catholic newspaper. And it was in a little building downtown in West State, with third floor, very cramped, smoky offices. And I had some newspaper clippings from high school. I had my resume, however that looked, took it into the editor, who was kind of intimidating. I was a little intimidated, and he looked everything over and looked at the article, and he said, we need someone to cover something this weekend. So do you think you can do it? Do you know how to take pictures? And I totally lied and said, sure, I know how to take pictures, because I knew that was part of getting the job. So, and my dad had been a professional photographer. So I thought, well, dad can help me. And this was 35 millimeter camera. So I left the interview with a camera and an assignment, and not only an assignment, but I had to interview the Catholic bishop, which at the time was Bishop O'Neill, and the Lutheran bishop, because they had done a prayer service together, and I was to cover this prayer service and interview both of them. So, I'm 18 years old. I have limited experience, and the bishops were great. They were wonderful, very nice. And I started working for the Observer that summer after my freshman year. And as I went through college, I picked up more freelance opportunities. So sophomore year, I worked was WYBR radio. I did some commercials, creative director, interim, and the Belvedere paper. So I've kind of done a lot of work in journalism, and I liked it because it was always different and interesting. And I got to meet many different people. And of course, when I graduated from college, the economy was in a downturn. So it was very valuable to have another skill, because the teaching part of it, I mean, I didn't get a job teaching probably until a year after I graduated. The economy was so bad. And then I taught fifth grade language arts, and then 6 through 8 language arts at St. Edward's School in Rockford for 4 years, all while supplementing with the freelance work. And I got my master's degree during my 3rd year of teaching. And I just felt like I needed to do something else. And there was an opportunity to become director of religious education at St. Ed's. And so I took that opportunity. So I did that job for 4 years. And in that last 4 years of being at St. Ed's, I got married, and my husband and I were expecting our first baby. So I quit full time, probably right after our daughter was born. So this is 20 some years ago, and but have really enjoyed doing the freelance work, and also gaining different other sides besides the Observer, going to other media outlets and freelancing for them.
Awesome. Well, and I think, it's such an interesting thing when you talked about the one of the side benefits of doing interviews is that you get to meet interesting people, and you have this perfect excuse, right? That, would you be open to doing an article? Or like for me, would you be open to being on the journey and that is a way for me to get to meet people and get to know people that I wouldn't if I didn't have this platform of getting to know. And I'm much more of a verbal or a verbal learner than I am a written learner, even though I love reading books. This is probably easier for me, easier venue. And so I think it is interesting that, a similar parallel there with one of the benefits of doing the work that you do in this particular piece is that I get to meet interesting people, and I get to know things about them that I wouldn't know just in normal conversation. So
Exactly.
so when you think about over like you said, the last 20 years or so as working as a writer, what would be some of those standout moments of people that, either articles that you written, stories that you, assignments that you were on? What are some of the ones that stand out to you as you think back that if that wasn't an assignment that you were given, you wouldn't have gone down that rabbit hole?
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, this year, 2024 was my 36th year with the Observer.
Okay.
And the other publications I've been with are Winnebago Chronicle, and that's 9 years for them. And also I do work with Northwest Quarterly Magazine. So I would say definitely one of the most interesting assignments that I have done would have been my first assignment with the Winnebago Chronicle newspaper. And this would have been in 2015, which was the 30th anniversary of the hijacking of the TWA flight. I think it was 847, but it was a TWA flight that Rockford native Kurt Carlson was on that got hijacked over the Middle East. And what made that interesting was that there on that flight that had gotten hijacked in 1985, there was a pilgrimage group that had gone to Israel to see the Holy Land, and they were on the way back to the US when the flight got hijacked. So there were 3 priests from the Rockford Diocese and a group of pilgrims from one of the churches, or some of the churches in the eastern part of the diocese. So to hear the story of that from people who were actually there, I got to interview, I think it was 2 of the priests, maybe it was all 3 of them, but 2 of the priests at least that had been on the flight. What was it like from this was an international incident, and and they had survived. The hijackers took over the plane. They had it come down to refuel. They went back up. So there was a lot of like landing and taking off, and all the people on the plane were afraid that at one of these points that they would purposely crash the plane and everybody would be lost. But what happened was at one of the stops, a lot of the women and children were let off the plane, and they just kept the men on the plane, including the 2 of the priests from the Diocese of Rockford. And of course, this was like another 17 days before they were finally released. So, I mean, it was a really amazing story. And I talked to the priest about this. I talked to one of the women that was on the flight. Her husband was a deacon, and she was in her 90s at the time. So that was really interesting to cover that. And I think, and that one ran in the Winnebago Chronicle paper. And I had done a story for the Observer on former Winnebago County Coroner Sue Fiducia. And it was kind of a series of how does your faith impact your work? So being the county coroner, as you might imagine, is a pretty sobering, grim type of job. But anyone that knew Sue Fiducia knew that she was just a wonderful, caring person. And a lot of the stress and the the things that she saw, the terrible murders and things that she saw in her job, she relied on her faith to get her through those things. So she, of course, was coroner when baby Crystal was found out in, I think it was a Rockton area. And then there was another little boy who was killed by his mother, and the mother was had mental health issues. So she was there for that. And just hearing about these stories and these terrible incidences, and then this sweet grandmotherly lady is the one that has to come and, is out there with the police and the fire department and in the middle of all the action. So that was an amazing story too. Um, I know that the whole mental health field, I've done a lot of articles for different publications on that. That's been in the forefront of things in the last probably 10 years or so. And I think it's getting the recognition it needs to get, because it's no longer as much of a stigma to say, well, I'm in counseling, or I think I need counseling, as it was years ago. So, and some of the articles that I've worked with you on, I think have been the suicide awareness. And the last one we did together was on managing election stress, which hopefully after tomorrow, we'll see. Hopefully
Yeah,
after tomorrow that'll be on the downturn, hopefully. So maybe there'll be more stress because people are, if we don't have a clear winner, that might be another part of stress, but
sure. Yeah. Well, it's interesting, two thoughts. One is that you're 100% right about Sue. I had the opportunity to not only meet her from, because of her role as a coroner, but I have been doing the last 15 plus years. I have been facilitating the homicide support group for the county, and every year we have an annual memorial for that. And then Sue would, even after she had retired as a coroner, she would come, as long as her health allowed her, she would come to the memorial. And baby Crystal was one of the candles we lit for. And she was just a very kind, sweet, gentle,
Mhm.
but also had a fierceness about her as well. And it was,
Right.
and I think I'm really was appreciative of getting to know her.
Mhm.
And like you said, how she could utilize in her own journey, her spiritual walk to bring light to some of the most gruesome things that happen in our community.
Right. Well, the main thing that I recall from the article that she had said was she was very much about giving these murdered children the dignity in death that they did not receive in life. So, that was a huge part of the article, and just an amazing interview.
Yeah. And it's interesting, this, for whatever reason this year, because by the time this airs, some of these things that we're talking about on the November 5th election, hopefully will have some level of resolve, meaning like even if it isn't clear, on the day like it was in 20, hopefully we'll have some clear direction of what's going to happen. But I have probably done more interviews either on TV, radio, or a newspaper for this particular election regarding the stress of this election than any other election. Now,
Right.
some of it may
Right.
be to your point that I think it is more, people are wanting to talk about it more now than in the past, and talk about emotional health and mental health. You know, I think that was one of the things that we saw, going into the pandemic, and then definitely during the pandemic and since. Um, but yeah, it's been interesting. I think
Right.
it's been 6 or 7 interviews in one capacity or another,
Right. Right.
regarding that. So that's been good.
Yeah, well, the one thing, and the one word that I always think of, and you mentioned, like, during COVID, that word was unprecedented. And I think that also applies to the election this year. It was, we've seen things that we haven't seen before, in the election, and who's running and all that. But yeah, so I would like to have a little break from the unprecedented stuff, right? I would like kind of things to sort of level out maybe a little, and so.
Yeah, no, I agree. And and one of the things I guess that I've appreciated with, with the articles that you have done is being able to get, state what the concerns are, what's the situation, but also giving more of a message of hope
Mhm.
and what can we do
Right.
versus just uh adding to the fear of the what if, and so
Right.
I've appreciated your writing regarding that aspect of it.
Right.
So when you think of like some of the elements of utilizing, that at one point you were going to be you were going to be a speech teacher and helping people learn how to the oral communication, and now a big part of what you do is in the written word.
Mhm.
So what are some of the things that you, besides some interesting people that you've met, what have you learned about yourself along the journey of your career developing as a writer?
It's a good question. Um, I guess I've learned that I need to have a lot of different things going on so that I don't get burned out. And lately, I mean, in the last probably month or so, I've had a lot of assignments, and it's been great. I've really appreciated that, but you have to, I guess the one thing I've learned too is you have to be prepared for, as a freelancer too, feast or famine. So either you get a ton of assignments and you're trying to juggle everything and do everything, and I try to do as many as I can, but I also have to know that for me personally, I have the teaching gig that I do, that tutoring consulting that I do. So I have to allow for that. I have to allow for time for my family, and so it's a balance. It's a balance. I never really wanted to work full time because of the family and managing things around here, and so that's been good that I've never had to do that. But um, I guess I try, as I get older, I'm trying not to be so, like if I have a lot of assignments to do, I'm kind of on edge. I'm not sleeping well, because I'm thinking about the assignments, or uh, one I'm working on now, I probably spent a day just trying to get the lead or the beginning of the article right, and it's still not right. So, um, so it's a balance. You have to kind of pace yourself. You have to, if I'm stuck on an article, since I work from home, I get up, I do something else. So, and I think you also have to learn to expect the unexpected. So I had wanted to be a speech teacher and technically never got the opportunity to do that until my kids, a daughter and a son who are adults now, but when they were in grade school, there was a program called Forensics for Kids, which was I think it was second through sixth grade. And once a year, they would have this contest, and every school who wanted to participate would get a group of students together, and the kids were to give speeches, 2 to 5 minute speeches on a topic that they enjoyed. So they would talk about their dog or their hobbies, or, um, so, and I thought, well, this is great. So my daughter competed as a second grader, and the kids actually didn't really compete against themselves. For, they competed against other people, but not like for a ranking. They were mostly competing to see how well they could do. So there was a trophy, a medal, and a ribbon, and there was maybe 20 kids in a room, and they would have a schedule, maybe 15 kids, and each kid would get up and give their speech, and the judge would judge them on their particular speech. So I felt like this opportunity for my kids really taught them the power of hard work pays off, which in today's society, that message is sometimes not as prevalent as we would like, but it was something I wanted to teach our kids. So, and they worked on the speeches. I helped them, I coached them. We had some really interesting ideas. And each of them received trophies every single year they participated.
Oh,
And,
nice.
I was there to help them, but they were the one up there giving the speech. They were giving the speech. They were, taking direction. They had memorized the speeches. They were very engaging. They had great props. So, and I think that has served both of them very well. Our daughter works in the field of business, so she has to give presentations. She has to meet people, and I think those skills are very valuable for young adults or anyone in any field to have.
Yeah, no, I agree, and it is always interesting. And I when I talk to students, regardless if they're middle school or high school or college age students, I talk to them about picking a direction that you're interested in and you're curious about, and that you get energy from when you're doing it, and not necessarily get so honed in on I have to know what I'm gonna be doing for the next 50 years or 60 years of my life when you're 14 years old. Because there's so many twists and turns, and
Hmm.
and that you can't necessarily ever foresee, like the downturn in the economy, or that they forgot to tell us that there's only so many jobs in that field. and
Right.
and so, like, I remember my daughter, who was interested in getting involved in the counseling field, and she's a performing artist. She likes arts. And she's came to me and said, I think I want to be an art therapist. And I said, well, this is what I'm going to encourage you to do. Art therapist, as a general rule, there are limited amount of positions, and they are usually working for an institution, a treatment facility, something like that. I would encourage you to get your master's in social work,
Mhm.
continue your interest in the arts as you already are doing, and then as you go into the field, then use your art and use that as a modality for the counseling. And so,
Mhm.
she did that. My son was the same way. She now works as a school social worker in Roscoe Middle School, and
Mhm.
she utilizes art as a way of the school counseling or the school social work. But
Mhm.
it would have been limiting if she would have gotten an art therapy degree,
Right.
because that would have been a pretty limiting
Mhm.
license.
Right.
So,
Right.
but I wouldn't have known that at her age. I wouldn't have known that unless someone had shared with me. And I almost that in the 90s, I almost got the wrong master's degree, which at that time didn't have a license. And
Mhm.
so I was very grateful for someone who had guided me into the right direction, because I just wanted to help people.
Mhm.
And counseling was the way. I didn't know the specifics about what. So I think, to your point, it's really about being able to introduce young people, recognizing that hard work and being resilient through that hard work is really, that's the real gift of it, more so than the trophies or the ribbons or the medals. Those are all nice,
Mhm.
but the real reward is the experience of doing it, and it
Right.
possibly opening up a pathway.
Right. Well, and it's a sense of confidence. It's a sense of presentation that, you're more comfortable speaking to people. And so and the forensics program was great because if somebody maybe their first year they didn't really know all the ins and outs and they ended up with a ribbon, that would might be an impetus for them the next year to come back and work a little harder or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing how, and I totally have seen this in my life. What I started out and wanted to do, I never really did until years after college with the coaching the speech group. But the other part of it is that I still, with the consulting with the tutoring, I still get to be a teacher.
Mhm.
So, and that was a lot of fun because I haven't done that for a while. It's starting with this tutoring position. But again, the writing, I mean, that's always kind of been there. And I remember thinking at one point, okay, well, I was in this really great school district working kind of like a teacher's aide job. I thought, well, if I just get to the principal and I just talk to him and he'll see this and he'll hire me and I'll be the speech teacher here for the next 30 years. And that never happened. And, it was hard, but I found I found a job that I thoroughly enjoy with freelancing and kind of consulting. It's been great. And you sort of never know what's coming up next, which is exciting too.
Well, and I definitely think, the entrepreneurial aspect of being a freelancer, there are some wonderful opportunities, but it comes right with the mind, you said, you used the phrase feast or famine.
Right.
We'll talk about it, is that, in this world, there's no guarantees. So you as metaphorically, you eat what you kill. And so if you don't finish the project, you don't get paid, and so
Right.
and to discipline yourself to be able to continue to um do that digging deeper, to continue to
Right.
bring quality with each article, for each assignment, and so and not resting on just phoning it in. So I think
Right.
that
Right.
is I think that's an aspect for people who are interested in doing some either freelance or entrepreneurial work. There is great opportunities that come with it, but it definitely, there's the discipline of being able to do the hard work is
Right.
also part of the
Right.
formula.
Right. Well, that's it. Like if I say I'm going to have something done, like I'd said I was going to have this article done at the end of the workday Friday, and I hadn't started it Friday morning. So I was like, okay, this is your deadline. Now you've got to just, lock in and focus in. But yeah, and I think back to when we were going through the COVID pandemic, that was devastating to the careers of journalists in general. And especially devastating to freelancers because there were no events to cover because everybody was home. And the other thing was, there was only, everyone would start, of course, at the beginning of it, everybody wrote about the pandemic and this is happening and the school's closed. And, I had a picture of these tables at my son's school with all the books and backpacks on them that the kids had left on Friday. And then Monday they couldn't come back because of COVID. So it was like, empty hallways, but full tables of books waiting to get picked up. So during the COVID era, I think that was really tough because I mean, there really were no articles that I did in 2021. There were none. And I would say maybe not even 2022.
Mm.
But the good news is that in 2023, Chronicle Media hired me back because I was let go because of the I mean, they basically were the editors were that was it. That was the whole staff of the paper. So they pretty much let everybody go, and I got to come back, once things were settled after COVID. But and that's the during the time of COVID is when I started a blog because I felt like like this is just crazy. Like none of us has gone through anything like this before. You don't know how to, like I know how to counsel my kids on being a young adult because I was a young adult, or I know how to counsel my kids on being a teenager because I was a teenager, albeit, way before them. But I think the blog was something that I was able to do as a creative outlet, and it really got me through to that and kept up with the writing. And I felt like I was at least doing something.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and I think again, with that, to be able to thinking back to that time period, in the counseling world, that obviously we were able to pivot and do things from a telehealth perspective and then figure out how we were going to, still do the same work because we were considered essential workers at that time period. But it was definitely a different platform for us to do, going from in-person to telehealth. And, I had just at June of 20, I had just taken on another agency up in Wisconsin. So I had, a Milwaukee locations that I was, trying to lead during that time period. And yeah, that was a very, and just Wisconsin's response to the pandemic compared to Illinois was much different response, and
Right.
just from a state perspective, and
Right.
outside of certain communities, like Dane County and things like that. But yeah, it was a very interesting time. That idea of like what do we mean by unprecedented? Well, meaning we haven't been here before,
Right. Right.
except we may not, you and I may not have been here before, but the country had been here before. And
Hmm.
I know for me, that was where I kind of, okay, what did FDR do? What happened during, the Spanish flu? What happened during other time
Right.
periods that we
Right.
could use those levels of resilience that
Right.
they did, for
Right.
leadership? Were some of the things that I leaned into at that time as well. So.
Right. Right. Yeah. And that's the thing. People that went through the flu epidemic in 1917, 1918, they're not here today to tell us. So we rely on, historically what they've said. But again, that's like 100 years late, before COVID. So it's definitely interesting.
Yeah. So Lynn, as you know, for the listener, if you were going to give any words of encouragement, either from a writing perspective or from a career perspective or following your passion perspective, what would be something that you would want to share with any listener?
Well, definitely to follow your passion and to do what you like, there's a lot of practice involved. There's a lot of hard work. I kind of mentioned I enjoy crafting. And so to this end, and I don't know how this is going to turn out, but hopefully it turns out okay. I'd done some crafts and things this summer, and there were two craft shows in the fall that I really wanted to get into, but I had scheduling conflicts and one show was all full, it was just, it wasn't going to happen this year. So I thought, well, I have these things that I've made. I'll keep them. They're fine. I can just keep them, put them in storage, and let's try 2025 for this. So this is something that I'm trying to discipline myself to do. And even if it's not, even if I make $200 or a couple $100 or whatever, it's been fun to do. And I'm really excited about some of the projects I'm working on in that respect that I could possibly sell at these different shows. So, and that's a whole different thing than the writing. And some days, I should be writing, but instead I'm in the craft room sewing. So, and again, it's the discipline, I'm fortunate that one of the, well, really all the publications I work for, but one in particular, they're really open to my ideas. So ideas that I bring in, having lived in Rockford my entire life, uh, I feel like I'm pretty well connected. And if there's a topic that I want to write about, I can usually find somebody that would help me with that. But I think, you know, if you are passionate about something and you work toward that and it doesn't happen, then be prepared to pivot in a way. Be prepared to go in a different direction. For me, my faith is very important. So I would pray about it. I would say, okay, well, this opportunity that I really wanted, it didn't happen. Why is that? You know, and I pray about it and I ask God, lead me in the path where you want me to go, which is scary because sometimes that's not really where you want to go, but it always ends up being a place that you want to be. So I think for me, I just have to remember, and even, 36 years into it, I'm still like, oh, like I don't have any assignments. I wish I had some more assignments and what can I come up with? And so it's always about, having the vision, trying to do what you want to do, not being afraid to take on different things, not being afraid to open yourself to different opportunities, even if you're not a total expert in the field, and be willing to do the hard work and pray for guidance when things are not going in the direction that you want.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And I do think, it is about giving 100% effort toward something, picking it and giving 100% effort, be willing to learn along the way, and not being overly attached to the outcome. I think and that's easier said than done. But and the reason why, for me, what I've learned about not being attached to the outcome is because the journey of what's happening as I'm doing it is probably the thing that I will utilize in the next chapter
Right.
regardless.
Right.
But if I get so caught up with the outcome that ends up being distracting,
Mhm.
and that becomes the focus, where I don't think that's ever really intended. And I agree for me, from a spiritual perspective, that I've learned, God has revealed that lesson to me
Mhm.
numerous times throughout my life. So
Right, right. Well, and like what you said with the outcome. So, one of the nice perks of my job is that every year there are 2 or 3 different writing contests that I can send my work into. So, I've sent my work. Yeah, I've looked through my articles and I pick out ones that I think are pertinent to this, or there's a category for it. And this year there was a category for historic feature, so I had one of those and put it in. And I didn't, I was sort of like, I'm putting these articles out there. I'm not expecting anything. I'm just going to see what happens. And so I ended up getting quite a few awards this year for the work I did, which is fantastic and totally gratifying because, the pay as a freelancer is not anything that is, over the top for sure. But the other part of that is that now I'm like, the end of this year going into next year, I have to like, okay, I'm not going to look for, oh, this would be a great one to send in for a contest, or like, don't pick my pieces based on if they would win a contest or if they would be judged in a contest. So, and sometimes, I do an article and I know right away, this one's really unique. This one I think I want to send. Other times it's like, I'll do an article and I'll be, going through what I've done in a year. I'm like, oh yeah, that one kind of might be a good one, to do. But it is all about getting to the heart of the piece and telling the story of the person and not thinking about all the extra, you know, I'm not doing this for the outcome of, oh, I may get an award. If I do, that's great. But I'm not writing it solely for that purpose.
yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. So Lynn, if someone wanted to get a hold of you, just to, learn more about what you're doing as far as your crafts, or as a writer, what would be the best way for them to reach out to you?
I have a profile on Muck Rack, which is it's like kind of like a social media for journalists. Also LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. I believe it's Lynne Conner is the thing on LinkedIn. Um, and I'm trying to think. I think there's and my blog. The blog is another way that people could get a hold of me, and that's www.lynnlovesthepast.blog. I
Oh,
think, pretty sure.
perfect.
So, but if you probably Google my name, and just put like freelance writer, things may come up with that as well. But yeah, I would look at the blog, as a way to contact me. Also LinkedIn also is a good way. And the Muck Rack, which is it's sort of a LinkedIn for journalists specifically.
Okay, perfect. Well, Lynn, thank you for being with us today. If anyone who has been listening to Lynn share her story about her journey as someone who has enjoys meeting people, telling their stories, and being able to share in other ways. First, originally thought it was going to be through speech and teaching that way, but then later that has evolved primarily through writing. But obviously, she's also had opportunities with that aspect of teaching. So, if anyone thinks that this would be a beneficial episode, please share it, and we look forward to being with you next week.